Hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martin Lovers. I'm a Chief Trend Watcher of Supply Chain Media. I'm also the editor-in-chief of Supply Chain Movement. That's the quarterly magazine in Europe. And I'm also the architect of the IT supply map. Europe we will discuss later. So in the next hour live, we'll have a webinar talking about how to create a resilient and AI-ready IT portfolio for the supply chain. So with me, so that's me on the left. I have Alan Duncan. Well, he's planned. I just before this he was in the audience. So I hope to get him back. So next to me I have Alan Duncan, and to introduce him, and hopefully I get him back. Otherwise we'll have to check and improvise. So Alan Duncan, before this he has been working for Blue Yonder, and before that, more importantly, he has been working for Gartner. So he has been in a lot of roles as a buyer, as a seller, and an advisor. So as an advisor, he's working for Gartner, but also for Bearing Point. In the past, like I said, he has been working for Blue Yonder, but also before that, he was working for Motorola. So he's an expert on SNOP. He has been involved in 26 SNOP projects, but now he is working at Criona, and Criona is a advisory firm and doing supply chain software selection. I have to get hold of him. Hopefully he is getting back to me on stage. So that's one thing I have to check. But before we hit the topic of supply chain software, some practical things. This webinar will be recorded. So everybody's on mute, but you can ask questions. So if you have questions, there are two ways to do that. So either you use the chat functionality on the right hand side, or better, you use the Q&A functionality. That's one below. So ask questions, I will track down. So if you have questions either to me or Alan, who will join hopefully shortly, I will get him on stage about that. Ask this question, and if it's line of the conversation we'll all be having, so I will ask this question immediately, so we make it more interactive. So after this, we will have an extra 30 minutes. There will be a Q&A at the end. So, but there will be an opportunity to have a conversation with me and Alan live in a virtual lounge. So after 5 o'clock CET, after this 1 hour webinar, there will be an opportunity to have a conversation with me and Alan in a virtual lounge. As of now, I'll put off my camera, and then I hopefully track down Alan to be on stage. Yes, but yeah. So I invite him again on stage. Oh, that's a technical problem to see. So he has switched stuff somehow. I try to get him back. So to be honest, Alan is in Croatia, and he said he might have a technical issue with his Wi-Fi, but I tried to get him back in a speaking role, but I don't know where he is. Sorry to say. Just before we started off, he was there, and we checked, and now I have to check where he is. And stupid. There's a question in the audience: how do I participate in the group? So when I pause the session, you will be able to join and sit down at the table. There's Alan. Hi, Alan.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. All right. So let's get back to the topic finally. Why are we talking about AI and resilience? So basically, this is an overview of what CEOs are talking about in their quarterly earning calls. So basically, they scrape this German company who's creating this visual is scraping data, and then they tell them what are CEOs talking about. So here you see it, and this is what CEOs are talking about in the last quarter in Q2. So, and the right hand side, the more right you go, you see the more important keywords they are addressing. Economic concerns is on the right hand side, and AI, you see that right there in yellow, but also supply chain. Supply chain has been in the right hand side of this framework since the start of COVID. And also you see sustainability popping up. And basically this is telling you that supply chain is on the radar of CEOs in the last years, I would say. So Alan, good to have you back in the webinar. So what is your take when you look at this framework?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that supply chain's been at a board level discussion since COVID, and it's likely to stay there. I think the realization through COVID and beyond, with the Red Sea situation, with the energy prices because of the situation in Ukraine, the wars in Ukraine, means that all those things that brought supply chain to the CEO's desk and to the board's desk haven't gone away, and all the predictions are that they're set to continue. And no surprise that AI is in there, and there's a natural curiosity about, if we've got all this disruption, can something like AI as a technology help us to manage that supply chain disruption? So no surprise to see it appearing on the CEO's table as well.
No. Talking about AI, I created this overview. There's a lot of confusion, I think, about what is AI, what is generative AI, and looking at this framework, I try to narrow it down to what is artificial intelligence. You see planning heuristics and linear programming. That's quite known to supply chain people. So moving from artificial intelligence, zooming in, you get machine learning, deep learning, and you see it yourself. So basically, they're explaining, since the last 1.5 year, we all know ChatGPT, and even CEOs are talking about it. So it's good to understand what is generative AI. You see it in the darker blue area, and what's general AI. So if you look at this, you have been working at Gartner, and you have also working at Blue Yonder. So if you look at it, where is the sweet spot for AI in supply chain?
I think at the moment there's a lot of curiosity around how something like a generative AI, ChatGPT models, can help to get through to the insights, to understanding the data that's underneath a supply chain, and that's a relatively less complex area to address with AI. I'm no expert in artificial intelligence. I understand linear programming and heuristics and so on because I did that at university. I've applied it in real life. Though you look at right through this, one of the big barriers we're going to face with AI, if we're not already facing it, is the fear that it creates. A lot of the problems that linear programming had, and it's been around as a technique for decades, but a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the problems it had in being adopted was fear of the unknown. Why is it saying that? Why is it telling me to do this? And if you've got a fear from LP and NLP and so on, that fear is going to be magnified 100-fold on AI.
Yeah.
And so adoption is going to be a massive change management concern.
Yeah. So we had a webinar last year how GDE Pete's, the coffee manufacturing company, is doing some pilots with software with LLM for forecasting and demand planning. Basically, you have a chatbot within your application, and you can ask questions. Even you are not trained in the user interface of this particular software, and you get answers from the chatbot. That these are the first applications of generative AI inside supply chain software. But that we'll get there. But we are far off. That these are pilots and not generic being used in that sense. So
Yeah.
before we go further, these are the things you mentioned. I created this slide a few years ago, and I expanded it because you have different kind of black swans. You have COVID, you have the war in Ukraine. For some companies, CSRD is a black swan. Okay, if you are a publicly traded company in the European Union, you know what's coming at you. But if you are not publicly traded, but you are a supplier of, say, Ahold or Heineken, you will be confronted with their needs to get carbon emission data, etc. So for some of these kind of companies, CSRD is also a black swan, and CBAM, cross-border administrative methodology, is also a black swan for a lot of them. And of course, since last October, we saw the conflict in Gaza, leading to the Red Sea and all kind of cost increase. But then you see all kind of ripple effects, bullwhips, and maybe heading to a recession or not. So this is what you're referring to, and this is the need for resilience. When you look at you work at Blue Yonder and Gartner before, do your companies you're talking to have this kind of overview what's coming at them in a coherent version?
I think what we've seen an awful lot of talk around building more resilience into their supply chains, and I think it's very difficult to anticipate a lot of these. Nobody could predict COVID-19 or Ukraine and Gaza, but what we can anticipate is that these sorts of disruptions are going to continue. And so what companies have started to do is look at how they can build that more resilient supply chain to be able to cope if one comes along. Now, it's a fine line, because investing in a resilient supply chain there's a number of aspects to do that. Some of them result in higher cost, but some of them actually inherently allow you more flexibility. They allow you a better customer service, customer experience, almost as a byproduct. And so there is it's not all about cost. It's all that there are aspects of resilience that will allow you to offer a different proposition to your customers. And so there can be a business case. There can be a CSR. There can be an environmental business case for some of the moves as well. Moving production closer to your main site. So not sourcing from the Far East as much will improve your resilience, but it will also reduce your carbon footprint to some extent. So there are trade-offs in all of that, and so they're not. There is a degree of sort of wargaming, the closed doors, what if risk assessment going on, but mainly it's the focus is on how do I build more resilience, more flexibility into my supply chain to be able to cope with the unexpected.
Yeah. Lately, I see a lot of need of companies for a command center to get an overview of this. And basically, in the old days, it was a control tower, or maybe they call it now an end-to-end supply chain control tower. And Gartner has coined the phrase command center for that. But to get there, you need to have an IT environment, and then we get to the IT aspect of all this. And this is already an illustration, I think, already 10 years ago. Basically, I created this illustration when Gartner pitched the idea of a layered application strategy. And as you see to yourself, you have different layers. You have your system of record with your ERP environment and some legacy systems. And in the middle, you have your system of differentiation, WMS, TMS, planning, etc. And on top of that, you have your system of innovation. So this was what my interpretation was of what Gartner was pitching of these different layers. But the main point is there's not one total system to have it all. Basically, you need to be flexible in a sense that you have different layers. Some you do not touch, some and some others you are quite flexible, especially on top of that the system of innovation to click on and click off. So that's the overview of well, already pitched 10 years ago in that area. So what's your take if you look at it? Is it still valid to have this space layered application strategy, Duncan? Alan?
Well, I mean, I think Gartner loves its models, and they have they have a benefit in creating a standard language around this, and so yeah, it's still valid. I think if we look at it, the reality of the situation around supply chain, particularly, there is still a lot of fragmentation around the ERP world. And I don't mean the vendors, I mean the deployment of it. So there are still many companies have got multiple ERPs installed in their business that don't talk to each other very well, that haven't got harmonized data sets, and those that do have a nice clean ERP layer, potentially at the next level up, the systems of differentiation layer, where you get into the planning tools, as an example. Again, a lot of companies still got a mixture, smorgasbord of systems in that area that are hanging off the ERPs in some way, that don't necessarily create that end-to-end view. And so, whilst it's a very valid model and it can help the conversation, I think there's still a lot of work being done to get the basics right, to get that foundation layer, whether it's ERP or it's end-to-end visibility, and then to be able to use that foundation layer for the real-time visibility, the transaction layer, to then start making sensible business decisions through a system differentiation planning type solution. So yeah,
if we look at
interesting
this,
model, but yeah, we're still trying to catch up with the basics in some
right.
cases.
And this is created, this illustration is created in a time frame where we had still most of the tools on premise, whereas now more and more companies, or even the vendors as such, are moving their application in the cloud. So that's a different era, I would say, but still we are not there yet with a lot of companies getting their application in the cloud, are we?
Yeah, I think it's a very careful about the statement in the cloud, because a lot of companies, most of the long established vendors have, to some degree, ported their capabilities into a cloud hosting environment.
Yeah.
And 10 years ago, you could get private cloud, you could get public cloud hosting of your applications. Now, in the reality was that those applications were just the same on-prem software, but hosted by somebody else.
Yeah.
Some have or are in the process of revolutionizing those capabilities and making them cloud native.
Yeah.
And when you're going through the evaluation of a vendor, and I know this is something we're going to get onto in a minute, that evaluation needs to understand the difference between is this cloud hosted, but old technology, if you like, versus is this cloud native? And if it is cloud native, is it taking advantage of the many benefits of being cloud native? The infinite scalability of cloud computing, to be able to do massive computations very quickly at a but very cost-effective way. So you no longer have to size your hardware to suit the biggest computation you might do in any day. Your hardware can flex to up and down, or the use of the hardware flexes according to what you're doing at that moment. And that's the power. That's one of the many powers of cloud native multi-tenant software. So yeah, it's a difficult, it's a terribly boring area of detail. But what do we mean by cloud applications?
Maybe
Do
that's
we
a good
mean
point.
these are, yeah, yeah.
And next is another more recent model I created, I think 2 years ago. So you see the different levels of systems. Basically, when you go to the ground floor, your sales orders getting in, and then they go into your ERP system. And then on next, you have your SNOE, your sales and operations execution. People are asking me, is there SNOE software? No, there is not, because it's consisting of MES, WMS, TMS, scheduling software, whatever you have. And then you get to your third level, sales and operations planning. That's your midterm supply and the demand volume matching. And in my understanding, in my opinion, IBP is a different layer, because that's close to your financial environment. It's more in finance area, but and we can discuss about that, but more importantly, you get to the top level, you end to end, and there you get the environment of digital supply chain twins. And then you get to the overview of what is your market demand, what is your market supply, what's happening in the outside world. So basically, this is your, what I call, converted planning tower framework. And what you see now, more and more companies are pace layering their applications to get this total overview of the different uh, processes to be supported. So this is my newer model. And one thing what's missing still is what you see now. More and more companies are using a data lake between all these kind of applications, not to be dependent too much on direct APIs between your ERP system and the others. So you have Snowflake and other data lakes. So that's a new, I think, addition to this model. Looking at this, so what is it? You have a lot of experience in the SNOP environment. When you look at this, is it what companies are building right now?
I think yes. The move is towards that sort of that top layer of you, the T, the your convergent layer,
Mhm.
and being able to see right across the supply chain from the supplier right through to the customer's customer,
Yeah,
is absolutely part of the strategy for a lot of companies. But I think what is still prevalent is the functional silos below that.
yeah,
And that's where the benefit of something like Snowflake and other data lakes is that they can start to share the data across. So you're not lifting and moving data to from logistics into planning and from planning into warehouse management. It's all one data set, and so you at least bring the system decision making together, if not yet the people decision making. And that we set the supply chain up the way it is because the problem was too difficult for one person to solve. So we broke it into functional silos like logistics, and even logistics is broken out typically into warehouse and transport. And we put planning in there, but we had long-term planning around the IBP, SNOP, and then we had the factory scheduling that may have reported into a different silo.
yep.
We are now able to start challenging those functional silos, and at least if we don't break them down, we are allowing them to use the same technology and the same data sets, which is a huge step forward. I mean, I remember going into many meetings with manufacturing, with finance, and the first 45 minutes of the 1 hour meeting were about discussing which version of the numbers we should be using, because finance had one view, manufacturing had another view, planning had a third view of what the numbers actually were. And we weren't talking about projections, we were talking about actuals.
Mm.
All of that has gone, so or is going. So we're in a much better starting point for these cross-functional conversations.
So as a summary, a lot of companies are building this convergent planning tower, or whatever you call it, but it's consisting of a lot of tools from different kind of vendors. And as you see here, this is the latest version of our SCM IT subweb map. I have been creating since 2012. So it has developed and it's grown a lot. These are the vendors with proven track records in Europe. So it is a European focus of the supply chain software vendor market. And you see a lot of them. We don't go through them in detail, but you see a lot of different software lines, ERP, the black one, the red one is WMS, warehouse management system. And you see a lot, there are a lot of software lines, and basically you will see the vendors which have a lot of implementations in Europe on a certain software type, and based on that, we map them out so people have an overview which vendors are available in the market. So and then we get to your Criona business you started quite recently, Alan. So when you are in need, say, for S&OP software, then there's the main question: how do you select the right software vendors? And as we may have seen, and I've seen it a lot, some companies take ages before having the actual agreement, along the line. So basically, we'll talk about what you are bringing to the market with Criona, and maybe you can first start. What is the traditional approach in the software selection?
Okay, so yeah, let me just say, just before I get into this traditional approach, because you make a very good point there, Martin. I had a look at the subway map, and I think it's an incredibly useful tool. And I'm not just saying that because we're on this call together. There are just in the planning space alone, there are 82 vendors in Europe claiming to be able to serve that sector.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if there are 82, if you go to the Gartner Magic Quadrant, which is a useful tool as well to identify who you should be talking to, there's something like 20 to 25 vendors in that Magic Quadrant. So there's a lot there's more not in the Gartner Magic Quadrant than there are in it. And so the whole process of identifying who you should be talking to, how you assess them is quite complex, and potentially with quite a significant outcome, either positive or negative if you get it wrong. So let me just answer your question. The traditional approach, and if you go to Gartner today, and I know this because I spoke to Gartner in Barcelona last month. They confirmed that typically this is the approach that they will recommend that you follow to select your enterprise software. And it doesn't matter whether that's an ERP or it's planning or it's TMS or it's WMS or any visibility tools. Broadly speaking, these 11 steps. And roughly speaking, you start with a long list of vendors. It could be up to 10 vendors. You issue an RFI. They will come in and they'll talk to you about their, how they can, fulfill your needs in that RFI, and then you decide which of those you're going to take to a competitive evaluation through the RFP. And the RFP is typically centered around a long list of functional requirements. There might be 180, 200 of them, and some non-functional requirements. And they'll come in, they'll do demos, they'll do presentations, and you'll score them. And you get down to 2. Now, in my experience, advising people through this process when I was at Gartner, and then my experience at selling through this kind of process when I was at Blue Yonder, it's not uncommon for you to get down to that sort of down selection to 2 or 3 vendors and conclude that all 4 or 5 of the vendors you looked at, or at least 2 or 3 of them, all pretty much can solve your problem. They can deliver your functional requirements. And so you've gone through a lengthy evaluation and you've concluded that you've got a couple of vendors there that are good for you. Now that might on the surface feel like it's a good place to be, but actually it's not. And the reason it's not is because there are inherent differences under the covers with these different products. and there are different capabilities of the people and the organizations that you're engaging with or potentially partnering with. And sometimes, or quite often, the conclusion that you draw is either of those two products will meet our needs, but we felt that the people from vendor A understood our business better, or we felt that the implementation plan from vendor B was more robust. And it comes down to a feeling. And so ultimately, the decision is, even though you've gone through a very robust and scientific line by line evaluation of multiple vendors, your end decision comes down to an emotional feeling. There's nothing wrong with that, but to us, we think that that's wrong. We think that it is possible to get under the covers and understand more of the technical differentiation between the vendors, and it's essential that you take a different approach with the vendors, so that you can establish really which one of them is going to be the best for your business going forward.
Before you can get the question why companies are still following this traditional approach. I was wondering, how long does this traditional approach take for ERP or supply chain planning?
Sorry, you dropped out for a second. Can you repeat the question?
So how long does this traditional approach take for ERP software selection or supply chain planning?
So for ERP, it's typically a lot longer, because the ERP touches so much of the business. So you've got a lot more stakeholders involved. You need finance, you need HR, potentially you need all the operations, sales need
Mhm.
to sign off on all of this. So it can be upwards of 12 months. And I was speaking to an ERP vendor last week, and they said, yeah, 12 to 18 months is not untypical for them. For a planning solution, as an example, then you're looking at 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
It always takes longer than you plan. Uh, you know, it never goes as quickly or as well as you expect. There are always delays. There are always internal stakeholders that need to understand more, or there are delays on the vendor side. The contracting takes a bit longer than you anticipate. And so, I think to do this, I've done it personally in 3 months,
Mm.
and it was possibly the most stressful 3 months of my entire career, to turn around an evaluation in such a short time. Now, I would say a comfortable timescale is about 5 to 6 months for a planning solution, or something complex like that.
Okay. So getting back to my initial question. So why are companies are still following the traditional approach?
So, excellent question. Comfort. Um, I think there's a lack of experience. Typically, you do this process maybe once or maybe twice in your career, and so you don't fully understand the pitfalls of the process. You go to ask the advisors, and they'll tell you follow this process, and it's not wrong. It's just not giving you the best outcome. Sometimes you've got a hard constraint, so you follow a proven methodology. Often there will be political influences around this, and saying, we know these vendors and we don't want to touch them. We don't know those vendors. We don't want to touch them. There aren't a lot of templates around for um, following anything other than that process. You can download various templates for the 180 features and functions of a planning
Yep.
solution or a TMS solution. You can't download templates for a different way of doing it, and so people will gravitate towards this.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of it comes down to a lack of experience, a lack of knowledge in how to do it differently.
Yeah, and in my experience, when you look at this list of functionality, it's getting longer and longer because they are
Yeah,
borrowing it from other people who then might know, supply chain directors might know, and this
yeah,
list of functionality questions get longer and longer.
Yeah, and often, and I've seen this from as a seller, you get a list of functional requirements, and in there, you've got an industrial manufacturer, and they've included things that are patently and obviously requirements for a retailer.
Yeah.
And you go back and you ask them the question, and they haven't really understood what it is that they're putting out there. And in the interest of time, they've just said, "There's a template, get it out there." They haven't vetted it, and so yeah, it's. I'm not saying that 180 or so requirements isn't a necessary step in the process. It's just not as critical as it has become.
So maybe you can get into the cost and risk of this traditional approach, and then we get to your approach.
Yeah. So essentially, the traditional approach is typically deployed as a arm's length transactional evaluation. We don't want to get too close to these vendors because this is a competitive situation. We don't want to share too much with them because that weakens our negotiation. And so, with that arm's length approach and a lack of sort of arms around them, behaving like partners, you risk not identifying the certain aspects of the technology that might deliver you additional value. So you may look at two vendors, and I'll stick with the planning solutions as an example. You look at two vendors, you want multi-echelon inventory optimization, and both can do it. And you tick the box, you say, right, we've got MEIO in vendor A and vendor B, that's fine. But fundamentally, vendor A might tackle that problem in a very different way than vendor B. And often that difference isn't brought out. And if they are different, then the chances are it results in one of the vendors being able to do it better or faster. And if they can do it better and faster, you don't find that out, then you potentially lose value. By keeping the vendors at arm's length throughout this, you potentially mean that they will add additional cost, safety, or time into their delivery plan to hedge on what they don't know. Now there are ways to tackle that. You could do a blueprinting phase, and then you could do a detailed plan after that. But generally speaking, they will hedge with additional cost or additional time, which means that your project's going to take longer and cost more. And
Yeah.
if it does that, then the chances are you're going to miss your ROI.
Yeah.
And and if you that last point there on the screen, the constrained process, what do I mean by that? If you are not really thinking long term about what your requirements are, and you're not engaging the vendor in the direction that they're evolving their solutions, you may choose a vendor that is good for now but not good for 5 years time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you may end up having to go and augment the solution with something else that may not integrate very well, or you may constrain your systems.
That's a valid point, because you see a lot of now vendors are pitching new flavors or new total technologies, created for the cloud with AI, that kind of stuff. So that there are different, I think, vendors, different levels, etc. So that's also what you are addressing.
Yes,
Maybe,
yes, and
yeah.
yeah, and those vendors have different priorities within their business about where they're evolving their technologies. They may predominantly be a retail company and you're a manufacturer, or vice versa.
Yeah.
So are they going to be investing more in their retail solutions and leaving you behind? Is the emphasis more on demand forecasting and using AI in the demand world, where you have an industrial environment that doesn't need as much investment in the demand planning. It
Yeah.
needs more investment in the supply side. So you've got to understand all of that to avoid getting into bed and into partnership with a company that could ultimately constrain your business rather than enable it.
Yeah, and maybe you can explain a bit about your approach of selecting supply chain software.
Yeah. Okay. So essentially those 11 steps are still at the heart of it, although we've added some steroids into it.
Mm-hmm.
And we it's all underpinned by the philosophy that there are 4 dimensions to the evaluation. And the first is needs, and I'll come back and describe each of these in a second. But needs, then value, risk, and longevity. Now, by needs, we don't mean the 180, functional and non-functional requirements. Yes, that's part of it. But by needs, we mean what is the business outcome that you're trying to achieve? What are the business capabilities that you're trying to enable in order to, with the technology that you're selecting? So what performance do you want out of this? What level of flexibility, what level of resilience do you want to get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And if we start there and we set the scene for all the vendors and saying this is where the business wants to be, the features and functions are simply tools to get us to those outcomes. And so we start by engaging vendors in the business outcomes. Now, before the procurement people say we can't possibly do that, that's sharing too much, that's all about giving away our negotiating power, we go to value. So now what we are doing is we have a business case. We always have a business case because nobody's going to invest in technology without some sort of payback. And so we know and understand where our business case is. We don't need to share that business case with the vendor if we feel that that is detrimental to a negotiation. However, each vendor will be able to contribute to that business case to a different extent.
Mm-hmm.
They do have unique capabilities or lack capabilities that mean that the value that they get out of the solution, you get out of the solution, will differ by vendor. And so in value terms, we mean how much can each vendor contribute to delivering my business case, and how much of that is unique because of the IP that's under the covers.
Mm-hmm.
And another extremely important part of delivering value is the extent to which the users actually use the solution. And so we would assess not just the unique value and the ability to deliver our business capabilities, but how usable is the solution? Because we all know that the world is littered with ERP implementations, and let's say SAP with APO, that are all augmented with Excel.
Yep.
Because companies couldn't get the value out of APO, or users were using APO to do the demand planning, so they resorted to Excel. So if the system isn't usable, you will not get the value out of it. So we need to assess that as well. But we need to be able to transform the business processes at the same time. And so, there are benefits coming from this new technology, from the new capabilities, but again, the users have to adopt it. So the business process has to change a lot of times. And so transformation and the ability to transform the organization and the business processes is a key part of it. Whether that comes from the software vendor, or it comes from a system integrator, or it comes from within, it doesn't matter. We have to understand our ability to transform and adopt this new technology. I won't go through all the bullets. I mean, risk is probably something that we already, in the traditional approach, we will assess risk. A lot of times, risk is only assessed at a program level. It's not assessed at a vendor level.
No.
And
yeah.
so, we might look at the technology that's underlying the solution and discover that it's actually built on 2009 technology, and therefore maybe more modern than others in the market, but not as modern as the cloud native solutions that may be available from another vendor. Therefore, the risk associated with that technology is different. And so we have to understand that, and that is at a vendor level. The financial security of the vendor. Are they privately owned? Are they owned by venture capitals or private equity? Are they owned by a global corporation, multinational? Each of the ownership structures will determine a financial security the risk associated with it. And what happens if that private equity owned business is put up for sale, as it inevitably will be?
Yep.
Who's likely to buy it? That creates a risk. Will it diverge away from your industry? And lastly, longevity. Strange word. Long partnership, basically. What's driving that vendor's decision making? Who owns them? Are they driven by quarterly performance and therefore only interested in the next quarter's sales results? What's their commitment and investment in innovation, that an innovation that is relevant to you as the buyer? Are they innovating only in an industry sector or a technology area that is not of relevance to you?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to understand that, because whilst we might be signing up to a SaaS contract that is 3 or 5 years in length, the reality is most of these decisions are going to be in place for 10 years or even longer. And so we need to be understanding the extent to which the vendors uniquely, individually, are able to support you over the next coming years. Now, this starts to get a little bit subjective, because how do you judge that? But you need to at least be asking the questions. You need to be then assessing the validity of the answers before you make your decision. So in summary, there's a comprehensive methodology behind all of this, but we're looking at needs, value, risk, and longevity as the underpinning foundations of a new approach to selecting enterprise software.
So you mentioned 11 steps traditionally, but you created your own version. Maybe you can go through it, not too extensively, hopefully, to see what's different.
Yeah, let me talk about what's different about it, because you're right, there's 11, but actually there's a much more detailed version of this that's just got 20 odd steps in it. So, but the important thing is that we start by bringing the buyer's business together to define and agree what the business needs are. And now some of this might already be done, because often the software selection is partway through a transformation program, and so a lot of as-is work has been done, a lot of to-be process maps might have been drawn, but we're bringing it back to saying, okay, just remind us all of the reason why we're doing this. What performance outcomes do we need? What capabilities might we need? And then what is our vision for the future? So that is essentially setting the process up for success, because everything else from here on in revolves around the needs, the value, the risk, and the longevity. Now we then go into the process with that foundation. But what we're doing now is, the underlying principle is we are starting to form a partnership with the vendors from day one.
Mm-hmm.
Those vendors understand what they do better than anybody. And rather than prescribe to them what you want them to show you, we prescribe to them what outcomes we are looking to achieve, and we invite the vendor with a blank sheet of paper to show what they are capable of bringing to the business. And that's step 3. So step 3 being the art of the possible presentation. So with a bit of a briefing on the business, and that's the vendor RFI briefing meeting. So we bring them in, we talk about needs, we talk about value, we talk about our expectations for engagement through the process, but we allow them the time to discover, to ask questions about our business. Now, I mean, again, that happens quite a lot, but we give them the floor to tell us how they would deliver the business outcomes, how they would deliver the business performance, and that's in the art of the possible presentation. And so in that, you are starting to invite them to become a partner, and that approach is essential all the way through, because you don't want to start building the partner type relationship at step 11, because that's the worst time to be doing it, or more accurately, to step 10 when you're trying to negotiate price. You want their skin in the game from day one.
Yep.
Okay, so we then go through the RFP, which is still again around needs, value, risk, and longevity. But we bring the vendors in, and they do they approach this and saying, here's how we fit to your requirements. Here's the value that we can bring out. These capabilities will extract value from your business in this way. And so it's not about a use case where they show you that they can forecast over
Yep.
24 months at SKU level, or that they can do a new product launch planning, or they can deal with cannibalization. It's not about that. It's a level above that. We can get into those sorts of things in the deep dives. And then we do a vendor fit workshop. Where are we internally? Where do we feel these vendors are meeting our needs, are falling short? That's where we get into the deep dives. And then we go down to 2, which is again part of the traditional approach. We go down to 2 for the detailed stuff. But here the detailed stuff differs again, because what we're now inviting vendors to do is come in and do a proof of value demo. So in the past, I've been on the receiving end of this, where I've handed vendors my data that drove my business case and said, there's the raw data. And they've come back and said, we've modeled your data through our system, and we believe we can do this to your inventory level. And it comes, and they tell you what benefit they can deliver to your business. Now, you can't do this for the whole business. You pick a small part of the business, but you're actually seeing the tangible effects of the technology, and you're able to compare vendor A and vendor B and the value that they will bring.
I got a
And
question from the
yep.
audience. Maybe that fits in here quite nicely. Great model, thanks, Alan. However, while the model mentions business needs, it doesn't explicitly show a step to define the problem. Where do you see that the discussion about what is a real problem for the company looking for software?
Okay, so excellent question. The needs are addressing that problem. So how have we
Okay.
arrived at the fact that we have a need? We already know what the problem is, because you don't start the software selection without having done some work beforehand.
Yeah. Okay.
So you've defined the business problem beforehand. You've probably done a lot of work.
And you will check it out, and you'll test it probably in this workshop. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you probably, by this point, you're about to start selecting software. You've probably had that process running for 12 or 18 months. Certainly up to 6 months has probably been running in the background, as is workshops, 2B workshops, and so on. So you've probably done that problem statement 6 to 12 months ago. So it's worth bringing it back, and that's why we say the needs workshop is where we start. Needs is partly about refreshing that problem statement, and then how do we take this forward now?
Yeah.
Good question.
You got a slide on the benefits. Maybe you go briefly, and then you get to some other slides.
Yeah. Okay. So a fundamental part of this is you're broadening the evaluation of the technology, so you are making a better decision, and you're making it a much more formalized evaluation of certain aspects of it. So risk becomes less subjective, more objective. Longevity becomes very objective. Value is quantified rather than a feeling. The focus is on building a partnership with the vendor from day one, all the way through the process, and getting them to commit to delivering the outcomes and the value with you. And
I can
yeah,
expect that building a partnership with a vendor, but you are talking possibly to 2 or 3 vendors, so you can
yes,
feel what is the commitment from each of them.
yes, exactly. And how much do they understand your business? How much do they understand the influence that they can have on your business? And how committed are they, not just to deliver the technology working to the spec that is agreed through the delivery of the deployment, but that the outcome will actually deliver the ROI. And so
Yeah.
that's where it comes to a higher ROI, because you got skin in the game from the vendor, all the way
And,
through this. You've
and
invited them to be playing the game with you.
yeah, and maybe that's leading to this slide. This is a model I created. And of course, we all know do know the Gartner quadrants. That's one quadrant with a lot of vendors in it. But basically, what this model is saying, you can create not one matrix but 4 matrix for each vendor, basically. And my point of this is, don't look at only look at functionality. There are 4
Yep.
dimensions. One is functionality, one is technology, the third one is delivery, implementation, and the fourth one is knowledge or domain expertise. How well
Yep.
are they known into retail, etc. So these are
Yep.
is a different approach from my side. So what is your take on this?
I think it's not that different actually. It is. I think I can see aspects of all of this fitting into our 4 dimensions.
Okay.
So in terms of the functionality, that's ultimately the fit to needs, which is a question for the needs dimension and the risk dimension, but is also there's an aspect of value in the value side as well. Technology, of course, is there's elements relating to risk in there. There's elements relating to the longevity side of it. So in summary, I see that this is a very useful tool as part of the 4 dimensions.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that most of the times, companies are addressing the third element, delivery of implementation, not enough. So for time's sake, we have way more things to address, and 1 hour is probably too short. So this is my take on planning. There's a lot of planning systems, but they fall short, especially on unpredictability and uncertainty, especially in the case of resilience. So find the supply chain software supporting scenario analysis and automated planning process that is essential. IT SuperMed, there are a lot of things happening on real-time transport visibilities. Vendors are popping up. You see them, Forecast, Project 44, and you name them. Then again, on sustainability, more and more new vendors are popping up because of CSRD. Look at Sweep, CarbMe, and the likes. You see a lot of things happening in S&OP and forecasting with the AI. I don't get in it, but there's even more in the field of supply chain startups and scale-ups. Too many to mention, but basically the highlighted ones you see in green. That's the carbon accounting. A lot of AI being used. Also in visibility part, the orange one, and also in the blue case, there's a lot of AI happening over there. To wrap it up, my thing is there are a lot of supply chain software types. These are you can compare of selecting a car. These are combustion engine cars, and there are 4 of them. But also there are electrical cars. Maybe that's comparable to supply chain software in the cloud. Look at Tesla upper left. It's like a cloud solution. But my main take on this, and that's when I want to wrap up with you, Alan. You have to match the maturity of your car with your ability to drive. So that's don't end up with a car you're not able to drive. So how do you compare selecting a car to selecting software, Alan?
Well, I'm rather sad like that. I would put it together a spreadsheet to compare the different capabilities of the vehicle. So, and I have done on many occasions. I think I like your analogy. I think the one thing to be concerned about is, and it stretches your car analogy a little bit too far because you can't do much to change your car, but you might not be capable of driving a supercar today, but you will get better at driving. And so you don't just select enterprise software to meet your maturity of today. You need to be choosing it so that you're confident it can evolve as you are better at driving in the future.
Yeah.
And you can't really do that with a car. You buy a supercar, you've got a supercar. But I suppose the analogy could be that you buy into the BMW range and you
Yeah.
buy a 1 Series to begin with, and then at some point in the future you buy an X6 because that's But I'm not talking about buying different models. I'm talking about evolving them. So
Okay.
car analogy falls down a little bit.
Okay, no problem. I also want to learn. So what we have done lately, we have to wrap up. What we are going to do in September, we have invited several S&OP software vendors in the field of manufacturing, and they will pitch in one afternoon, each one 1 hour. So within one afternoon, you have 5 pitches from an hour, and in one afternoon, you get a lot of understanding of what's the DNA of S&OP. They're pitching. So Alan will be there in September. That's about S&OP. We will have a similar event in an afternoon on October the 9th about WMS, warehouse management systems. So you can see and assess the vendors. And that's another thing. For Q&A, we're out of time. There's way much to discuss, but the good thing is we have an extra 30 minutes. So if you have more questions for Alan or myself, we will be sitting down at table 1 right after this. So I hope you liked it, and there's some more information about me and about Alan. And with this, I would like to thank the audience for listening in and asking your questions. And I want to thank Alan. I know you're on a holiday in Croatia, and I know you're with some children around you are playing and enjoying the summertime. So thank you, Alan, for making the time in spite of your summer holiday in Croatia. But thank you for joining me.
Pleasure.
With this, I like to wrap up. And if you want to join me and Alan at the table, I feel free to sit down with us in the next 30 minutes if you have more questions. If not, I hope you like this webinar. It has been recorded. And we will be back in August for some more exciting webinars talking about all kind of stuff about supply chain. Thanks for now, and hope to see you.
There was a question about how to join the chat. Do people just stay on?
Quite simple. I will pause this and go to table 1, click on a seat, and you'll be there. Thanks for now, and bye-bye.